Hi folks, this is all the fruit, and look at the beautiful big fruits of the blood apple, Malus nitvetskiana, which is also considered a variety of Malus pumila. I mean, it's just mid-June and they're already so big and red. And then look at the European crab apple. Small green fruits, hard and sour. And the thing is, even in autumn, they will not be much bigger or much more colorful or much more sweet or much more palatable. In Europe, for tens of thousands of years, they used to be a survival food. And I always wondered, how would somebody, the early agricultural societies, how would they take something like this and turn it into modern stuff like Golden Delicious and Granny Smith and so on? Well, turns out just because we have garden apples here and crab apples in the forest, that doesn't mean that the European crab apple, like Malus sylvestris, is the wild ancestor of the edible apples. Actually, the wild ancestors of our edible apples and also of most of our ornamental apples are a group of apples from Central Asia, and one of them is like this Malus pumila, Malus nitvetskiana. But now, tell me, why do the apple trees in Germany and in Europe produce green, sour fruits of small size, while there is not one, but a plethora of apple species, subspecies, varieties, and so on in Asia that produce big, colorful, sweet, aromatic fruits? Those are not even some of the biggest ones. Remember, the name of this thing is Malus pumila, the small apple. Those apples are considered small. Do you think humans took something of that size over there and made it into huge, sweet, aromatic apples? Nope, they didn't. No humans were involved in the creation of the modern apple. Well, of course, humans were involved in the creation and preservation of modern named apple varieties, but actually, they, in certain parts of the world, namely in parts of Central Asia, in the Pamir and Tian Shan mountain ranges, for tens of thousands of years, humans could go into the forests, which in some areas would be predominantly apple forests, and munch on big, sweet, aromatic apples. Quite unusual. Basically, we don't see in many places ready-made, big, sweet, aromatic fruits for human consumption. Usually, most fruits, especially the red ones, they are made for consumption by little birdies. So what happened in those areas of Central Asia which didn't happen in other places? Is the secret hidden here? You gonna tell us the secret? Nah, you can't, because you're just a human. Well, you're a piece of gypsum, but anyways. Those apples were not selected by humans. They were selected by bears. It seems that in those mountains of Central Asia, where there are forests made up mostly of apples, bears walk around and munch on apples all autumn to acquire enough fat for winter. You know that sugar can be directly transformed into fat, while proteins cannot. Well, the sugar from the apples, the bears transform it into fat, and then it's enough for hibernation in the cold mountains of Central Asia. And basically, when humans went there and saw those apple forests, well, the nomads of those areas were of course happy because they didn't have to cultivate them, just had to come and shoot and eat the bears and pick and eat the apples. But then later societies, they started to cultivate those apples, and they didn't have to start with a small sour green crab apple, but they started with big, tasty, sweet apples. And then the explanation scientists came up with thousands of years later is that the bears would walk around those forests, eat the apples from the tastiest trees. Well, the tastiest, biggest, most aromatic apples, maybe even the most colorful ones. I don't know, do bears see red very well? Then this red color would also make sense. And then they would poop somewhere else. Does a bear poop in the woods? Yeah, Otherwise the bear couldn't have selected the apples. And so the bears usually would spread the biggest, sweetest and tastiest apples. Of course, the bears are not only beneficial for the trees, especially the bear cubs. They seem to climb those apple trees and completely destroy them. The trees are a bit too difficult to climb for most mama and papa bears. The cubs can climb them, but they are bear cubs, so they break a lot of branches and devastate those trees. So it's not a completely beneficial relationship, but that's basically the explanation how bears created hundreds of wild, superior apple varieties over millions of years. However, one thing I don't understand. Okay, in Central Asia you had apples and bears, but in Europe you also had apples and bears everywhere. Why did they do this selective thing just in Asia and not in Europe? What were the special conditions in the Tian Shan and Pamir Mountains for bears to create big edible apples? I think not bears, but visitors have ripped off so many apples here. Let's try one from the ground. They are supposed to have a bright red flesh. No bright red flesh, but funny thing is, it's not completely unripe. The apple is already softish and juicy-ish, no sweetness, only a mild sourness, very mild apple flavor. So it's definitely not completely ripe, but it's not unripe either. It's half ripe. Yeah. If I was walking in the woods, no matter if I'm a bear or a human, I would totally munch on a couple of those in this stage of ripeness. Probably in autumn I would also collect a huge amount to store for the winter, but crazy, even now in June. Yeah, not a really good apple because it's half ripe in June, but a decent apple. Crazy. Just the only thing that doesn't add up, the flesh is only very slightly pink, but it's supposed to be very bright red. I doubt it will get so much more red once it ripens, but crazy. Tell me, folks, what you think about all those crazy apple varieties, wild apple varieties in the forests of Central Asia. Do you think the bears really did it by pooping in the woods? Apart from that, stay tuned for a lot more fruit videos from beautiful and cultivated and wild apple varieties. And of course, don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe.